In the year 2378, humanity had spread its reach far beyond Earth. Dozens of colonies thrived on distant planets, and starships traveled between systems with ease. But peace was fragile. Tensions brewed among rival factions, and the vastness of space hid dangers no one could predict. It was in this uneasy era that a strange signal echoed through the void, a message unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. The signal came late at night, or what passed for night aboard the orbital monitoring station Aegis 7. A young technician named Mira Chen sat hunched over her console, sipping cold coffee as she scanned data streams from deep space probes. Her shift was almost over when an alert flashed on her screen. At first, she thought it was interference, just another glitch caused by radiation storms or stray asteroids. But then the same sequence repeated itself. 3 short bursts, followed by 3 long ones, and finally 3 short bursts again. SOS. Mira whispered aloud, recognizing the universal distress code. She frowned. Who would use such an old-fashioned signal? And where had it come from? Mira ran diagnostics to pinpoint the source. The results made her blood run cold. The signal originated near the edge of human territory, in a region known as the Veil, a stretch of uncharted space, filled with swirling nebula and gravitational anomalies. No ships were scheduled to pass through there, and no colonies existed nearby. Whoever, or whatever, had sent the message wasn't supposed to be there. She flagged the discovery for Commander Ilara Voss, leader of the infamous Black Talon fleet. The fleet wasn't officially part of Earth's military anymore. They were mercenaries, ex-soldiers turned private contractors who took jobs too dangerous or too morally questionable for anyone else. Their reputation was one of ruthlessness and efficiency, but also of loyalty to each other, if not always to their employers. When Ilara received the report, she didn't hesitate. She knew the stakes. If the signal came from intelligent life, it could mean first contact with aliens, a monumental moment for humanity. But if it was a trap, it could spell disaster. Either way, someone had to investigate. Ilara called an emergency meeting with her crew aboard the flagship Eclipse. The room buzzed with tension as officers filed in, some rubbing sleep from their eyes, others already speculating about the mission. Standing at the head of the table, Ilara projected a map of the Veil onto the wall behind her. "We've been tasked with finding the source of this signal," she began, her voice steady despite the weight of the situation. "It's coming from here." She pointed to a blinking red dot surrounded by swirling clouds of gas. "We leave within the hour." Lieutenant Caldoran, her second in command, raised an eyebrow. "You think it's legit? Could just be pirates messing with us." "It's possible," Ilara admitted, "but we can't ignore it. Not after what happened at Proxima Centauri last year." Everyone fell silent at the mention of the colony destroyed under mysterious circumstances. Rumors had circulated ever since about hostile alien forces lurking in the shadows. As preparations got underway, Dr. Leora Quinn, the fleet's xenobiologist, studied fragments of the transmission. Unlike the others, she wasn't convinced the signal was meant solely as a cry for help. Something about its structure felt deliberate, almost like a puzzle waiting to be solved. Hours later, the fleet entered hyperspace, leaving familiar stars behind. As the ships hurtled toward the unknown, strange anomalies began disrupting navigation systems. Lights flickered, engines groaned, and sensors picked up faint whispers in frequencies no human device should detect. Ilara stood on the bridge of the Eclipse, staring out at the swirling colors of hyperspace. For all her confidence, doubt gnawed at her. What were they heading into? Were they chasing salvation or doom? Unbeknownst to them, the signal continued to repeat, growing louder with every passing moment. Somewhere out there, something, or someone, was waiting. The journey into the Veil was anything but smooth. The Black Talon fleet had faced countless dangers before: pirates, asteroid fields, even rival factions, but nothing could prepare them for the eerie expanse they now entered. The Veil wasn't just empty space. It was alive with strange energy currents that twisted and churned like a restless beast. Swirling nebulae painted the void in hues of crimson and violet, their light casting an otherworldly glow on the fleet's hulls. On board the flagship Eclipse, tension simmered among the crew. Equipment malfunctions became frequent, forcing engineers to work around the clock. Navigation systems glitched, sending ships drifting off course. Tempers flared as sleep-deprived officers snapped at one another over minor mistakes. Even Ilara Voss, usually unshakable, felt the weight of unease pressing down on her shoulders. Lieutenant Caldoran stood beside her on the bridge, arms crossed as he stared out at the chaotic beauty of the Vale. "This place doesn't feel right," he muttered under his breath. "It's like it knows we're here." Ilara shot him a sharp glance. "Don't start with your superstitions, Cal. We got enough problems without you adding paranoia to the mix." But deep down, she couldn't deny the feeling creeping up her spine, a sense that something vast and ancient watched them from the shadows. She shook it off, focusing instead on the task ahead. Whatever awaited them, they needed answers, and fast. Meanwhile, Dr. Leora Quinn pored over fragments of the alien transmission in the science lab. Her workspace was cluttered with holographic displays showing waveforms, spectrograms, and cryptic symbols. She'd managed to isolate patterns within the signal, though deciphering its meaning proved far more challenging than expected. "It's not just a distress call," she explained to Captain Reyes, who stopped by to check on her progress. "There's structure here, layers of information encoded beyond the SOS. It's almost poetic in a way." Reyes frowned. "Poetic? You mean like some kind of alien art?" "No." Leora hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "More like a warning. I think whoever sent this wanted us to find them, but also wanted to make sure we understood the risks." Before Reyes could respond, alarms blared across the ship. The fleet emerged from hyperspace near a massive object floating amidst debris fields of shattered ships. At first glance, it looked like a colossal ring, its surface etched with glowing runes that pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat. Sensors detected faint signs of power emanating from within. "What is that thing?" someone whispered on the bridge. Ilara studied the image projected onto the main screen. "Whatever it is, it didn't get there by accident. Those ships, it looks like they tried to escape and failed." Cale leaned closer, narrowing his eyes. "Or maybe they were attacked." The crew fell silent, contemplating the implications. Whoever, or whatever, had created the ring might still be inside. And if the debris field was any indication, visitors weren't exactly welcome. Despite the danger, Ilara made the decision to investigate. "We didn't come all this way to turn back now," she said firmly. "Prepare a boarding party. We'll take the Shadowhawk in close and see what we're dealing with." As the smaller shuttle detached from the Eclipse and approached the ring, the crew braced themselves for the unknown. The runes grew brighter as they neared, pulsing faster until they seemed to synchronize with the rhythm of their own heartbeats. Static crackled over the comms, followed by faint whispers that no one dared acknowledge. When the boarding party landed on the ring's outer surface, they found an entrance, a jagged opening leading into darkness. Beyond it lay corridors unlike anything they'd ever seen. Walls shifted subtly, as if breathing, while gravity fluctuated unpredictably. Ghostly echoes reverberated through the air, speaking in languages none of them recognized. "This isn't natural," muttered Sergeant Ria Torres, gripping her rifle tightly. "Feels like we're walking into a nightmare." Ilara stepped forward, determined not to show fear. "Stay sharp. If this is where the signal came from, we need to find out why." As they ventured deeper, the whispers grew louder, forming words they couldn't quite understand. One phrase, however, repeated itself clearly: "You shouldn't have come." For the first time, doubt flickered across Ilara's face, but turning back wasn't an option, not when the truth lay just ahead. The corridors of the alien ring twisted and turned in ways that defied logic. The walls shimmered faintly, as though alive, their surfaces shifting like liquid metal. Gravity fluctuated unpredictably, sending members of the boarding party stumbling or floating momentarily before crashing back to the ground. It was disorienting, maddening even, but Ilara Voss refused to let her team falter. "Stay focused," she barked over the comms, her voice cutting through the eerie whispers that seemed to echo from every direction. "We're here for answers." Her words carried authority, but inside, she felt anything but confident. The deeper they ventured into the structure, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The glowing runes etched into the walls pulsed faster now, almost in sync with the rapid beating of her heart. Each step forward felt heavier than the last, as if the ring itself resisted their intrusion. Dr. Leora Quinn walked beside Ilara, scanning the environment with a handheld device, her brow furrowed as data streamed across its screen. "This place, it's not just architecture," she said softly. "It's organic and mechanical fused together, like a living machine." Before anyone could respond, movement caught their attention up ahead. Shadows shifted unnaturally, coalescing into humanoid forms. But these weren't human. Standing before them were biomechanical entities, their bodies sleek and metallic yet covered in pulsating veins of light. Their eyes glowed an unnatural blue, and when they spoke, it wasn't with voices, but directly into the minds of the intruders. "You are not welcome." Ilara raised her weapon instinctively, signaling for her team to do the same. "Who, or what, are you?" she demanded, her voice steady despite the chill running down her spine. The creatures tilted their heads simultaneously, as if studying her. "Sentinels," came the reply, cold and emotionless. "Guardians of the Nexus." "Nexus," Ilara repeated, glancing at Leora, who shook her head slightly, a silent admission she didn't know what it meant either. One of the sentinels stepped forward, raising a limb that transformed into a weapon-like appendage. Without warning, it fired a beam of energy toward the group. Ria Torres dove out of the way just in time, the blast scorching the wall behind her. "Weapons free," Ilara shouted, opening fire alongside her team. The sentinels moved with terrifying speed, dodging bullets and retaliating with precision. Sparks flew as plasma bolts ricocheted off the walls, illuminating the chaos. Caldoran grabbed Ilara's arm, pulling her behind cover. "We can't win this fight," he yelled over the din. "There's too many of them." Ilara gritted her teeth, knowing he was right. They were outnumbered and outmatched. But retreating meant leaving without answers, and possibly unleashing whatever threat lay hidden within the ring. "Leora," Ilara called out, "can you shut them down? Disable their systems?" Leora hesitated, her fingers flying over her scanner. "They're tied to the structure itself. If I try to interfere, I risk triggering something worse." As the firefight intensified, one of the sentinels lunged at Sergeant Torres, pinning her to the ground. Before it could strike, Kale tackled it, driving his blade into its chest. The creature spasmed violently before collapsing into lifeless shards of metal and flesh. "They bleed," Kale shouted, panting. "They're part organic." This revelation gave Leora an idea. "If they're biological, maybe we can disrupt their neural pathways. Give me a minute. I think I can recalibrate my EMP device." But time was running out. More sentinels poured into the corridor, surrounding the humans. Just as hope began to fade, Leora activated her modified EMP. The pulse of energy surged outward, causing the sentinels to stagger and collapse, their lights flickering out. "Now," Ilara ordered, leading the charge back toward the entrance. The team sprinted through the shifting corridors, pursued by the groans of reactivating sentinels. When they finally reached the shuttle, they piled in and launched away from the ring, narrowly avoiding blasts from defensive turrets. Back aboard the Eclipse, the crew regrouped, battered but alive. As Ilara reviewed footage of the encounter, she noticed something chilling. The weapons used by the Sentinels bore unmistakable similarities to designs stolen from Earth decades ago. "What does this mean?" Kale asked quietly, voicing the question on everyone's mind. Ilara stared at the image, her jaw tightening. It means someone has been playing us all along. And somewhere deep within the ring, the glowing runes pulsed brighter, as if anticipating the next move in a game far older than humanity. Back aboard the Eclipse, the mood was grim. The boarding party had barely escaped with their lives, and the Sentinels' advanced weaponry left everyone unsettled. But what troubled Ilara Voss most wasn't the aliens. It was the unsettling resemblance between their technology and classified designs stolen from Earth years ago. Someone had leaked humanity's secrets to an unknown enemy, and that someone might still be among them. Ilara called an emergency meeting in the war room, where officers and key personnel gathered around a holographic display of the alien ring. Tension crackled in the air as she addressed the group. "We're not just dealing with aliens here," she said, her voice sharp. "Their weapons are based on our tech that disappeared under suspicious circumstances. This means there's a traitor somewhere in human space." Murmurs rippled through the room. Accusations flew silently behind narrowed eyes as crew members exchanged uneasy glances. Trust, already fragile after years of dangerous missions, began to fracture further. Lieutenant Caldoran stood near the back of the room, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. He'd been unusually quiet since returning from the ring, avoiding eye contact with anyone, especially Ilara. When she turned her gaze toward him, he shifted uncomfortably, guilt flickering across his face for just a moment before he masked it. After dismissing the meeting, Ilara confronted Kale privately in her quarters. The dim lighting cast long shadows across the walls, mirroring the weight of the conversation to come. "You know something," she said without preamble, her tone leaving no room for denial. Kale hesitated, then sighed deeply. "I didn't think they'd use it against us," he admitted, his voice low and strained. "Years ago, when I was stationed at Proxima Centauri, someone approached me, offered money to sell classified data. They said it would help form alliances with potential allies. My family, they were being held hostage. I didn't have a choice." Ilara stared at him, her expression unreadable. "You sold Earth's secrets. To who?" "I don't know," Kale snapped, running a hand through his hair. "They never showed their faces. All I know is that they promised my family would be safe if I handed over the files. Afterward, I tried to report it, but by then it was too late. The damage was done." For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Ilara broke the silence. "If this gets out, the council will have you executed. And maybe they'd be right to do it." Kale looked away, shame etched into every line of his face. "Then why haven't you turned me in?" "Because we need answers," Ilara replied coldly. "And because I want to believe you're still capable of making things right." Before either could say more, alarms blared throughout the ship. Rushing to the bridge, they discovered a massive fleet emerging from hyperspace, hundreds of ships bearing down on them. The Sentinels had summoned reinforcements. Panic spread among the crew as Captain Reyes barked orders to prepare for battle. "How did they track us?" someone shouted. Ilara clenched her fists, anger and frustration boiling inside her. She couldn't afford distractions now, not with an entire fleet bearing down on them. Turning to Kale, she gave him a hard look. "This isn't over," she said firmly. "But if you want redemption, prove it out there." The Black Talon fleet scrambled into formation, outnumbered and outgunned. As the first wave of enemy ships opened fire, explosions lit up the void like fireworks. The fight was chaotic, brutal, and desperate. Every shot fired reminded Ilara of how close they were to annihilation, and how much depended on whether Kale truly intended to make amends. Amidst the chaos, one thing became clear. Betrayal had brought them here, but survival would demand unity, or sacrifice. The battle erupted with a ferocity that left no room for hesitation. The Sentinels' fleet outnumbered the Black Talons 10-1, their ships sleek and menacing as they closed in like predators circling prey. Plasma bolts streaked through space, lighting up the darkness with bursts of fiery destruction. The Eclipse rocked violently under enemy fire, its shields flickering dangerously close to collapse. Ilara Voss stood on the bridge, her jaw clenched as she issued orders with precision. "Divide into smaller squadrons," she commanded. "Use the debris field as cover. Lure them into traps." Her strategy relied on the chaotic environment surrounding the alien ring. Shattered ships from centuries past floated aimlessly, their jagged remains creating a labyrinth of obstacles. Human vessels were smaller and more agile than the Sentinels, giving them an edge in maneuverability. But it wasn't enough to turn the tide completely. Lieutenant Cal Doran led one of the strike teams, piloting his fighter with grim determination. He knew this was his chance to prove himself, to make up for the betrayal that had brought them here. His comm crackled with updates from other pilots as he darted between chunks of wreckage, firing at pursuing Sentinel ships. Each successful hit felt like a small step toward redemption, but the odds remained overwhelming. On board the Eclipse, Dr. Leora Quinn worked alongside engineers to recalibrate the ship's weapon systems. Her earlier discovery about the Sentinels being part organic gave her an idea. "If we can modify our energy weapons to target their neural pathways," she explained to Captain Reyes, "we might be able to disable them without destroying their ships entirely." Reyes nodded, barking orders to implement the changes. Within minutes, modified plasma cannons fired experimental shots at nearby enemies. To everyone's relief, the beams disrupted the Sentinels' control systems, causing several ships to drift lifelessly into the debris field. But the victory was short-lived. More enemy reinforcements poured into the fray, relentless and unyielding. The Black Talons fought valiantly, but casualties mounted. Explosions lit up consoles across the fleet, and cries of pain echoed over open channels. Amid the chaos, Ilara noticed something crucial. The Sentinels seemed focused on protecting the ring itself. Every time a human ship strayed too close, multiple enemy vessels converged to drive them away. It confirmed what she'd suspected. The key to winning this battle lay within the artifact. "Kale," she said over the comms, her voice cutting through the noise. "We need to take out the ring's core. If we can disable it, we cripple their entire operation." There was a pause before Kale responded. "You realize that means going back inside, right? After what happened last time." "I know," Ilara replied firmly. "And I'm asking you to lead the mission. You've got the most experience navigating those corridors." For a moment, there was silence. Then Cal's voice came through, steady and resolute. "Understood. Send me the coordinates. I'll assemble a team." As Cal prepared for the perilous mission, Ilara turned her attention back to the battle. Using clever tactics, she ordered the fleet to create diversions, drawing the Sentinels' attention away from the ring. Ships launched decoy drones and fake distress signals, buying precious time for Cal's boarding party to slip inside unnoticed. Once aboard the alien structure, Cal led his team deeper into the labyrinthine corridors. The walls pulsed ominously, as if aware of their presence. Static crackled in their ears, and faint whispers grew louder the closer they got to the core. "This place feels alive," muttered Sergeant Ria Torres, gripping her rifle tightly. "Like it knows we're coming." "It probably does," Cal replied grimly. "Stay sharp." When they finally reached the central chamber, they found the glowing orb surrounded by intricate machinery. Its light pulsed faster now, almost frantic, as if sensing their intent. Dr. Quinn's voice came through their headsets, guiding them through the process of planting explosives. As they worked, Cal glanced at the others. They all knew the risks. If they failed, not only would they die, but the fleet outside would fall too. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose burning within him. Redemption wasn't just possible, it was necessary. With the charges set, Cal hesitated. "Get out of here," he told his team. "I'll stay behind to ensure the detonation sequence goes off." Protests erupted over the comms, but Cal cut them off. "This is my mess to fix," he said simply. "Now go." As his teammates retreated, Cal took a deep breath, staring at the pulsating orb. Outside, the battle raged on, unaware of the sacrifice about to be made. Keldoran stood alone in the heart of the alien ring, the pulsating orb casting an eerie glow across his face. The air around him hummed with energy, vibrating through his body like a low-frequency heartbeat. He could feel the weight of what he was about to do pressing down on him, not just the mission, but the burden of everything that had led him here. Detonation sequence initiated. Came Dr. Leora Quinn's voice over the comms, her tone tense but controlled. You have 5 minutes before the core destabilizes. Get out of there, Kale. I'm staying, Kale replied firmly, his eyes fixed on the orb. If I leave now, there's no guarantee the charges will go off properly. Someone has to make sure this works. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Leora spoke again, her voice carried a mix of frustration and sorrow. You don't have to do this. We can find another way. There isn't time, Kale said quietly. And honestly, maybe it's better this way. He didn't elaborate, but his meaning was clear. This was his chance to atone for the betrayal that had put them all in danger. If he died ensuring the fleet's survival, so be it. As the countdown began ticking away inside his helmet, Kale activated the holographic interface surrounding the orb. Strange symbols flickered across its surface, shifting and rearranging themselves as if responding to his presence. Despite not understanding the language, he recognized patterns, warnings, perhaps, or instructions. Either way, they weren't stopping him. The deeper he delved into the system, the more hostile the environment became. Automated defenses sprang to life, launching drones and turrets from hidden compartments in the walls. Kale moved quickly, dodging plasma bolts and returning fire with precision. Each step forward felt heavier than the last, both physically and emotionally. At one point, a massive biomechanical drone emerged from the shadows, its glowing eyes locking onto him. It charged with terrifying speed, forcing Kale to dive behind cover. His weapon overheated after several bursts, leaving him no choice but to grab a shard of broken machinery from the floor and use it as a makeshift blade. With a desperate roar, he plunged it into the creature's exposed core, watching as it collapsed into sparking fragments. Panting, Kale pressed on, sweat dripping down his face despite the cool air. As he neared the final checkpoint, ghostly whispers filled the chamber, louder and more insistent than ever before. They seemed to form words now, fragments of sentences spoken in voices that sounded almost human. Turn back. You cannot stop us. This is your end. Kale clenched his teeth, ignoring the voices. He reached the control panel where the explosives were rigged and double-checked the connections. Everything looked stable, but then something unexpected happened. A surge of energy coursed through the room, causing the orb to pulse violently. Alarms blared, and the runes along the walls lit up in a frantic cascade of light. What's happening? Leora demanded over the comms. They're trying to override the detonation. Kale shouted back, frantically working to counteract the interference. His fingers flew over the holographic controls, inputting commands based on sheer instinct. Time was running out. The countdown had dropped below 2 minutes. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath his feet, and a deep rumble echoed through the chamber. From the shadows emerged a monstrous figure, a towering biomechanical entity with multiple limbs and glowing red eyes. It exuded menace, its very presence radiating power. This must be what they've been protecting, Kale muttered under his breath. The creature lunged at him, forcing him to dodge at the last second. He rolled to his feet, grabbing a fallen sentinel weapon and firing wildly. The shots barely scratched its armored exterior, but they bought him precious seconds. Gasping for breath, he turned back to the console and slammed his fist down on the final activation switch. It's done. He yelled into the comms. Get everyone clear. Now. Outside, Ilara watched the countdown timer tick toward 0. Her chest tightened as she realized what Kale had sacrificed. Forcing herself to focus, she ordered the fleet to retreat beyond the debris field. Behind them, the alien ring erupted in a blinding explosion, sending shockwaves rippling through space. When communications were restored moments later, only static greeted her. The explosion tore through the alien ring with a brilliance that lit up the void like a second sun. The shockwave rippled outward, shaking the eclipse and sending smaller debris hurtling in all directions. On the bridge, Ilara Voss gripped the railing as alarms blared and crew members scrambled to stabilize the ship. For a moment, relief washed over her. The core was destroyed, and the Sentinels' fleet had scattered, their coordination disrupted. But then something shifted. In the heart of the wreckage, where the ring once stood, a shadow loomed, a shape darker than the surrounding space, impossibly large. At first, it seemed like an aftereffect of the blast, a distortion caused by residual energy. But as the dust settled, the truth became horrifyingly clear. The explosion hadn't ended the threat. It had awakened something far worse. A colossal biomechanical leviathan emerged from the ruins, its body writhing with tendrils of metal and flesh fused together. Its eyes glowed an ominous red, scanning the area with predatory intent. When it moved, entire chunks of debris were crushed beneath its massive form. It let out a deafening roar that vibrated through every ship in the fleet, sending shivers down spines. "What is that thing?" Captain Rice whispered, his voice trembling. Ilara stared at the creature, her mind racing. "It must have been trapped inside the ring," she said grimly. "That's what the Sentinels were guarding, and what Kale sacrificed himself to destroy." The Leviathan didn't hesitate. With unnatural speed for its size, it surged toward the nearest Sentinel ships, tearing them apart with ease. Then it turned its attention to the Black Talons. "Weapons online," Ilara barked, snapping into action. "Target its core, if it even has one." Torpedo launchers fired, plasma cannons roared, and missiles streaked across the battlefield, striking the beast repeatedly. But the attacks barely fazed it. Each impact only seemed to enrage it further, causing it to lash out with devastating force. One swipe of its tail sent 2 human fighters spiraling into oblivion. On board the Eclipse, panic began to spread among the crew. "Shields are failing," someone shouted. "We can't hold out much longer." Ilara clenched her fists, searching for any weakness in the monster's design. Her gaze fell on the faint glow emanating from its chest, a pulsating orb similar to the one Kale had destroyed. "There," she pointed. "Focus fire on that spot." The fleet adjusted their aim, concentrating everything they had left on the glowing orb. Explosions erupted across the Leviathan's surface, chipping away at its armor. Slowly, painfully, the orb began to crack. Then came a transmission, static-filled but unmistakably human. "Ilara," Cal's voice rasped through the comms, weak but alive. "I'm still here. I managed to survive the blast." Shock rippled through the bridge. "Cal, how are you alive?" Ilara demanded, torn between disbelief and hope. "There's no time to explain," he replied urgently. "Listen carefully. The orb in its chest isn't just a power source. It's controlling the Leviathan. If we overload it, we might be able to bring the whole thing down." "And how do you suggest we do that?" Ilara asked, her tone sharp despite the relief flooding her chest. "I rigged some of the explosives before I got out," Kale explained. "They're set to remote detonation. If you can lure the Leviathan closer to my position, I can trigger them manually." Ilara hesitated, knowing the risks involved. But there was no other choice. "Understood. Everyone, fall back and draw its attention toward Sector 12. That's where Cal is." The fleet executed the plan with precision, launching decoys and firing concentrated salvos to bait the Leviathan into following them. The creature roared in fury, giving chase as the humans led it deeper into the debris field. Meanwhile, Kale waited amidst the wreckage, clutching the detonator in his hand. His suit's oxygen levels were critically low, and pain shot through his body from injuries sustained during the earlier fight. Still, he forced himself to stay focused. This was his final stand, for redemption, for humanity, and for Ilara. As the Leviathan drew closer, its glowing orb now fully exposed, Kale activated the explosives. A series of blasts erupted around the creature, destabilizing its structure. In its dying moments, the Leviathan let out a final ear-splitting scream before collapsing into a heap of twisted metal and organic matter. Static filled the comms again. "Cal," Ilara called out, her voice breaking slightly. There was no response. For a long moment, silence reigned aboard the Eclipse. Then, faintly, a transmission came through. "Tell them, we made it count." The silence on the bridge of the Eclipse was suffocating. Ilara Voss stood frozen, her hand still hovering over the comms panel, as if waiting for Cal's voice to return. But it didn't come. The static remained unbroken, a cruel reminder of what they had lost and gained. Captain Rice finally broke the tension. "Commander," he said softly, his tone respectful but urgent, "we need to move. The Sentinels may regroup, and our fleet is in no condition to fight another battle." Ilara nodded stiffly, forcing herself to focus. "Signal all ships to fall back. Set course for the nearest safe zone. We'll regroup there." Her voice was steady, though her eyes betrayed the storm raging within her. She turned away from the console, unwilling to let her crew see how deeply Kale's sacrifice had shaken her. As the battered fleet limped toward safety, damage reports flooded in. Ships were riddled with holes, shields were depleted, and medical bays overflowed with wounded personnel. Morale was at an all-time low. For every survivor who felt relief at escaping alive, there was another mourning the loss of comrades or questioning whether the victory was worth the cost. In the science lab, Dr. Leora Quinn worked tirelessly to analyze data collected during the encounter with the Leviathan. Her hands trembled slightly as she sifted through fragments of information, piecing together the creature's origins. What she discovered chilled her to the bone. This thing wasn't just guarding the ring. It was the ring. She murmured aloud, staring at holographic projections of its anatomy. It was grown, not built. The living weapon designed to protect whatever secrets lay inside that artifact. Her assistant glanced up nervously. "You think there are more like it out there?" "Almost certainly," Leora replied grimly. "And whoever created them, they're either long gone or lying dormant somewhere, waiting." The implications weighed heavily on everyone. Humanity had stumbled into something far beyond their understanding, and the consequences could be catastrophic. Yet even as fear spread among the crew, so did a quiet determination. They had faced unimaginable horrors and survived, not because they were stronger, but because they had each other. Back on the bridge, Ilara stared out at the stars, replaying Cal's final words in her mind. "Tell them we made it count." His sacrifice had saved countless lives, but it also left a void in her heart. They had shared a complicated history, love, betrayal, forgiveness, but now she would never have the chance to fully reconcile with him. Hours later, when the fleet reached the designated rendezvous point, repairs began in earnest. Engineers worked around the clock to patch up ships while medical teams tended to the injured. Despite the exhaustion etched on every face, there was a sense of purpose driving them forward. They had been tested, pushed to their limits, and emerged battered but intact. Ilara called a meeting with her senior officers to debrief on the mission. The room was somber, the usual banter replaced by solemn reflection. When asked about Kel, she simply said, "He died a hero. Let's make sure his death means something." As discussions continued, one question lingered unanswered. Who, or what, had sent the original SOS signal? Was it truly a cry for help, or had it been bait to lure them into this trap? And why had Earth's stolen technology ended up in alien hands? Before anyone could speculate further, a new transmission interrupted the meeting. It came from Earth's United Council, demanding a full report on the incident. But embedded within the message was something unexpected, a set of coordinates pointing to another region of space. Ilara frowned, studying the numbers. "This wasn't part of the official communication," she said slowly. "Whoever sent this wanted us to find it." Leora leaned closer, her eyes widening. Coordinates to another artifact. The realization hit them all at once. The alien ring hadn't been unique. There were others scattered across the galaxy, hidden and waiting. Whatever ancient civilization had built them wasn't done shaping humanity's destiny. For the first time since the battle, Ilara allowed herself a small smile, not of triumph, but of resolve. The Black Talon fleet had survived, but their journey was far from over. Somewhere out there, more mysteries and dangers awaited. The battered Black Talon fleet limped back to Earth, greeted not with cheers but with wary stares and whispered accusations. The United Council convened an emergency session to debrief Commander Ilara Voss and her crew, demanding answers about the alien ring, the Leviathan, and the mysterious SOS signal that had led them into chaos. But as Ilara stood before the council chamber, a stark room filled with cold steel walls and holographic displays, she couldn't help but feel like a pawn in someone else's game. "Commander Voss," began Councillor Grayson, his tone clipped and accusatory, "your actions resulted in significant loss of life, not just among your own fleet, but also potential diplomatic fallout due to unauthorized engagement with extraterrestrial forces." Ilara met his gaze without flinching. "With respect, sir, we acted on orders to investigate the SOS signal. If we hadn't intervened, whatever was inside that artifact could have posed a far greater threat to humanity." Councillor Grayson leaned forward, his fingers steepled. "And yet you destroyed the very thing you were sent to study. Without evidence, how can we trust your account of events?" Before Ilara could respond, Dr. Leora Quinn stepped forward, clutching a datapad filled with information gathered during their mission. "We may not have physical remnants of the artifact," she said calmly, "but we have extensive sensor logs, recordings, and analysis confirming its nature. It wasn't just a structure. It was a living weapon designed to annihilate anything it deemed a threat." Leora's words carried weight, especially when paired with visual projections showing the Leviathan's terrifying form. Gasps rippled through the chamber as council members watched footage of the creature tearing apart ships with ease. Even Grayson seemed momentarily shaken. "This changes nothing," he insisted after a pause. "Your recklessness endangered countless lives. We cannot afford such risks moving forward." Ilara clenched her fists but held her tongue. She knew arguing further would only dig herself deeper into trouble. Instead, she focused on delivering one final message. "If you want proof of what happened out there, look at my crew. Look at the scars they carry, not just physical ones, but emotional ones too. They fought against impossible odds to protect humanity. And if you don't believe me, then fine. But remember this, if another artifact appears, you'll need us again." Her statement hung heavy in the air, silencing any further objections. For now, the council agreed to let the matter rest, though under close scrutiny. In the weeks that followed, the surviving members of the Black Talon fleet struggled to adjust to life back home. Many found solace in small rituals, sharing stories of fallen comrades over drinks, visiting memorials dedicated to those who didn't return. Others threw themselves into work, determined to ensure no one else would suffer the same fate. Kel's sacrifice weighed heavily on everyone, particularly Ilara. Though hailed as heroes, she felt hollow, haunted by memories of their shared past. Late at night, she'd sit alone in her quarters, staring at old photos of him, wondering if things might have turned out differently had she trusted him sooner. Meanwhile, Leora published her findings in a classified report titled Echoes of Extinction. In it, she detailed the ancient war between the creators of the ring and another race, the same beings depicted in murals found within the artifact. Her conclusion sent shockwaves through scientific communities. These artifacts are remnants of civilizations long dead, their creators wiped out by the very weapons they created. Humanity must tread carefully, lest we repeat their mistakes. Public reaction was mixed. Some praised the report as a wake-up call, urging stricter regulations on AI and biotech research. Others dismissed it as fear-mongering. claiming humanity was too advanced to fall victim to such errors. Amidst the debates, rumors began circulating about strange signals detected near distant star systems, similar to the original SOS. While officially denied by the Council, whispers persisted among pilots and explorers who claimed to have seen anomalies in uncharted space. For Ilara, the truth was clear. The galaxy was vast, full of secrets and dangers that humanity barely understood. As she prepared for her next assignment, she couldn't shake the feeling that the artifacts weren't done with them yet. Somewhere beyond the stars, glowing runes pulsed faintly, waiting for the next curious soul to awaken their wrath. Months had passed since the Black Talon fleet returned from their harrowing encounter with the alien ring and its monstrous guardian. Life aboard the Eclipse had settled into a fragile routine, though scars, both visible and invisible, remained etched into every crew member. Repairs to ships were nearly complete, but mending broken spirits proved far more difficult. Despite the lingering grief, there was an unspoken understanding among them. They had faced something ancient and terrible, and somehow they'd survived. For Commander Ilara Voss, however, survival wasn't enough. The questions that haunted her refused to fade. Who had sent the SOS signal? Why did it lead them to the artifact? And most importantly, why had Earth's stolen technology ended up in alien hands? These mysteries gnawed at her relentlessly, keeping her awake long after everyone else had retired for the night. One evening, as she reviewed sensor logs from the mission in her quarters, Dr. Leora Quinn knocked softly on her door. "You're still working?" Leora asked, stepping inside. Her expression was weary but determined. "I thought you'd want to see this." She handed Ilara a datapad displaying new findings. Upon closer inspection, Ilara's blood ran cold. Embedded within the original SOS transmission, a detail overlooked during the chaos, were coordinates, not just random numbers, but specific locations scattered across the galaxy. "There are more artifacts," Leora said quietly. This wasn't a one-time thing. Whoever created these rings left breadcrumbs leading to others. Ilara stared at the screen, her mind racing. And whoever leaked our tech, they knew about this. "It's possible," Leora admitted. "Or maybe they stumbled onto it by accident. Either way, we can't ignore it. If even one of those artifacts awakens another Leviathan, or worse, we could be looking at extinction-level consequences." Ilara set the datapad down, her resolve hardening. "Then we go back out there. We find them before anyone else does." Her decision sparked heated debates among the crew. Some argued that continuing such missions was reckless, given the losses they'd already suffered. Others believed humanity had no choice. If they didn't confront these threats, someone else would, likely with less preparation and greater risk. In the end, loyalty won out. The Black Talon fleet wasn't just a team, they were family. Together, they prepared for what promised to be their most perilous journey yet. As the fleet departed Earth once more, heading toward the first set of coordinates, Ilara stood on the bridge of the Eclipse, staring out at the stars. Somewhere deep in her heart, she hoped Kel could see them now, that his sacrifice hadn't been in vain. But she also knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Each artifact was a potential Pandora's box, holding secrets humanity might not survive uncovering. Leora joined her, breaking the silence. "Do you think we'll ever truly understand what we're dealing with?" Ilara shook her head. "Probably not. But understanding isn't always the point. Sometimes it's about making sure history doesn't repeat itself." The ship surged forward, leaking behind the safety of familiar space. Ahead lay only the unknown, glowing runes, ancient warnings, and echoes of civilizations lost to time. As the fleet ventured deeper into the void, Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. Whether friend or foe, the galaxy watched silently, waiting to see if humanity would rise or fall. And so, the cycle began anew.